Then Tracy, I've been trying to keep track along the way. I think we have almost everybody, or definitely quorum, but if I'm wrong, let me know.
Yeah, no, Tony, I think that's correct.
Okay. So John, I will hand it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Joni. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission Summer Flounder, Scup, and Black Sea Bass Management Board. Today on March 5th, 2026. My name is John Maniscalco. I'm an administrative proxy for New York. We have Commission FMP coordinators Tracy Bauer and Chelsea Toohey, as well as Tony Kearns to help us get through today's agenda, and I believe we have an hour and a half to do so. We do have a draft agenda, and I'll look for hands to see if there are any additions or modifications that board members would like to make to today's agenda. Not seeing any. We'll consider the agenda approved by consent. Up next is public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda. So at this time, if there's any public online that would like to comment, please raise your hand on the webinar. All right, I'm not seeing any hands. So we will move on to the main purpose of today's meeting, which is to consider final approval of proposed black sea bass recreational measures for the 2026 and 2027 fishing years. This is a final action, and I believe we're going to start with a review of the proposed regional measures by Tracy Bauer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me switch over. All right, can you see the PowerPoint okay?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so for today's presentation, I am going to, one second, it's not showing the right thing for me. There we go, okay. So for today's presentation, I'm going to start off with a little bit of background on how we got here. Then I'll move into reviewing the black sea bass proposed regional and state measures and the coast-wide liberalizations that result from all the different combinations of those measures. And then the board action for consideration today is to consider the approval of the 2026-2027 recreational measure options for black sea bass. So first, background. So back in December 2025 at the joint board and council meeting, the board and council agreed on a 20% liberalization for black sea bass, summer flounder, and scup. The council and board agreed to remain status quo for 2026-2027. And also at that meeting, the board agreed to meet again in early February to discuss the distribution of the liberalization based on direction from one of black sea bass's addenda, Addendum 32. And Addendum 32 was approved back in 2018. It had established a 3-region framework for setting recreational measures for black sea bass, with the northern region, which is Massachusetts through New York. New Jersey is its own separate region, and then the southern region, which is Delaware through North Carolina, north of Cape Hatteras. And this addendum had some guidelines for how to set recreational measures for black sea bass, including some direction for states to develop measures to meet the coastwide target in a manner that aims to reduce intra-regional and inter-regional disparities where possible. So on this slide, I have the status quo management measures for each region with size limits ranging from 16 to 16.5 in the northern region. And again, this is status quo currently, what the management measures are. Size limit of 12.5 inches in New Jersey and 13 inches in the southern region, and then possession limits range between 2 and 7 fish in the north, 1 and 15 fish in New Jersey, and 15 fish in the northern region, and the seasons themselves are all highly variable. So when the board met again it was on February 5th, 2026, they met again as planned at their December meeting to discuss the distribution of that liberalization and the guidance in Addendum 32 to reduce the intra and inter-regional disparities where possible. And after much deliberation, the board approved a distribution of the 20% coastwide liberalization, where the southern region would get a liberalization of 16.5%. The northern region would not be able to exceed 27%, and the New Jersey region would receive the remaining liberalization from the northern and southern regions. So for this year's methodology, to be able to determine how all the different combinations of the regulations and what regulations are meeting what percentage of liberalization, we used the recreation demand model, which with that information, we calculated the median percent liberalization. And the process this year was a little bit different from previous years in that this year we actually calculated the median coastwide liberalization for all the combinations of measures from the three regions. In the past, we could only calculate the estimated percent change for a few different sets of example measures, so we didn't know the coastwide percent change until the very end of the recreational measure setting process in late spring. But now we know, at this meeting, what combinations of measures are actually meeting our liberalization target. So now moving into the proposed 2026-2027 recreational measures for black sea bass, starting with the northern region. The northern region submitted one options with specific sets of measures for each state that overall achieve an estimated 26.9% liberalization. And as a reminder, the board motion had said the northern region cannot exceed a 27% liberalization. So each state lowered their size limit by half an inch for both modes, or just private and shore for Rhode Island, since their for-hire fishery was already at 16 inches. And then changes were also made to the possession limits and seasons for some of the states, and all of which, for specific details on what has changed, you can refer to the staff memo. The southern region submitted two options, one of which achieves an estimated 13.3% liberalization and the other achieves an estimated 15.6% liberalization. One option lowers the size limit by half an inch for all four states and opens the season a few weeks earlier. The other option only increases the size limit in Delaware and Maryland, but Virginia and North Carolina would have a much earlier season start date, April 1st instead of May 15th. New Jersey submitted 10 options, as the state was allowed to utilize all of the remaining liberalization, and we weren't sure how much would be available. And the options they submitted achieved an estimated liberalization between 16.1% and 17.8%. So for their options, they provided some combination of increasing the bag limit from 1 to 2 in the summer and expanding their season within the spring, summer, or fall. So they tried out a lot of different combinations basically to see what would hit the overall 20% coast-wide liberalization of 20%. So I have the New Jersey options on these two different slides. And again, you can look at the memo to see the differences between each and the resulting percent liberalization achieved by each. So once all of the states submitted all of their options, we were able to go back and calculate the coast-wide liberalization for every single combination of all of these different options. This came out to 20 total combinations possible that could be achieved by mixing and matching all of the different options. The coast-wide Liberalization was rounded to the nearest whole number, just like the allowed liberalization in the motion, which we had some discussions with Garfo about. And rounding to the nearest whole number recognizes the estimated liberalizations may not be precise out to several decimal places. Two combinations, A and G, equaled a 21% liberalization, which I have in red there on the slide. And these two options are both cases where the southern region option, that SR2, is combined with either NJ2 or NJ5. So if the southern region selects SR3, the other two New Jersey combinations, NJ2 and NJ5, combinations B and H, it would actually equal 20%. So it's only in some cases with these two New Jersey options, when a certain southern region option is selected, that we hit the 21%. If a different southern region option is selected, then we are still at 20. So that concludes all of the different options and the resulting coastwide liberalization from all of those options. In terms of next steps, today, again, the board action for consideration is final approval of the proposed Black Sea Bass recreational management measure options for 2026 through 2027. The states will have a deadline of April 1st to inform commission staff of their final selection of measures that they wish to implement. And we as commission staff are aiming for providing the commission's letter to Garfo with all the final measures by April 15th. And then the states will implement their selected Black Sea Bass measures this spring. So with that, that is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the presentation, Tracy. Are there any questions from the board? Nicola?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the table that has all the combinations together and the coastwide percent liberalizations shown, that the decision that was made to round to the nearest whole number, was that a technical committee decision, and was it made at a time in the process that it could apply to each of the regions? For example, and I believe the answer is no here, did the northern region understand that they could aim for 27.2 or 27.3%? Thank you.
I'll just jump in here. Nicola, thank you for your question. And this rounding, I do not believe was discussed by the TC. It was something with discussions with staff when we were talking about how to present the information. So it's more of a more recent decision.
Nicola, we just did it for the final product based off of just these principles around what happens once we're finished with the model, like combining all the options, combining all of the regional options together.
As a follow-up, might I ask for the table to be shown without that rounding to get a sense?
Certainly can. I think, Tracy, did you have a backup?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got it. Oh, there we go.
Okay, thank you. I'm probably gonna reference this later in some comments. So I'm glad, thank you for having it available.
Next hand I see is Adam Nowalski.
Very much. Good afternoon. My question is regarding the recreation demand models treating of North Carolina harvest. My understanding is that it does not presently parse out the harvest north and south of Cape Hatteras. Our management area is the harvest north of Cape Hatteras. I believe the last 3 years of emerald harvest south of Cape Hatteras has varied between in the neighborhood of the low couple 100,000 fish, averaging about 219,000 pounds of fish. Has there been any conversation about deducting for that number? And because I believe that if we backed out that approximately 219,000 pounds of fish, it would actually bring all of these percentages under 20%. So could you talk a little bit about conversations that have been had about backing out that catch south of Cape Hatteras that the RDM is presently included?
Yes, thanks, Adam. So that was something that the TC did discuss, and where we ended that conversation and what the TC concluded was not to deduct that harvest out, because it is still in the model, that harvest that's south of Cape Hatteras in North Carolina, but to use it as sort of like to be risk adverse by including it, basically.
Next hand is David Sikorsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering about the decimal points here and trying to think about this from a risk perspective. Having the decimal points is fine, but not having them seems fine to me as well. And I'm thinking about kind of our resolution here. How zoomed in are we? Thinking back to December when we set where we discussed anywhere from 0 to I think 39% being the liberalization. We ended up in the middle. So is there a way to describe this kind of for the public and the board to think about this on a scale level and how it relates to risk? And then can we measure that? Is it even something we should, really be considering, those small decimal points? That's where my head is right now. So I think it's a question comment, but I think there's questions in there. Like what do the decimal points mean here on a big picture risk?
David, is that a question for staff or for other board members?
I think staff. I'm thinking the technical folks, but I'm happy to hear from anyone because I just love to kind of wrap my head around it in that frame of thinking.
It's a good question, and it's one I think currently, at least on the staff perspective, we're viewing it as that the RDM is great, but we are unsure if it really has the level of precision, out to like 2.11 or whatever, like multiple decimal places. We're not sure if the precision is there. And that's sort of where we landed, at least in our discussions, that it's at least, we didn't say in past years, we'd say like a reduction of 20.7. Our reduction or our liberalization here was a, whole number. So we thought, there's some uncertainty in the data. So we go with just rounding to the nearest whole number, and say that these numbers, they're 20% essentially. And, not consider those decimal places other than, using it to round to the nearest whole number.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've dealt with a lot of heartburn with the decimal points here in Maryland with our favorite fish, the striped bass. So that's really helpful. And thank you.
Serino?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate a chance to follow up to David's question, because I think what New Jersey was trying to show with their supplemental memo, and I think what it boils down to is about a 0.5% in this, the difference between one of our options that says 20.5 and one that says is right at 20, is about 12,000 pounds for 0.5%. Some of these are even fractions of that. We're talking about 0.2%. So even at 0.5%, we're talking about 20,000 pounds. As we mentioned, the North Carolina harvest that's in there that shouldn't be is closer to 200,000 pounds, so about 10 times what these percentages over are looking at. And that's the worst offenders here. So that's what we were trying to show with those tables, and the scale of the fractions of a percent. Thank you.
Any other board members want to comment on rounding and decimal points? So, I mean, not seeing any other hands, just off my own perspective. I mean, rounding is it's a convention that is used commonplace, and I don't think we'll find ourselves in any trouble rounding to the nearest whole number. And while I recognize New Jersey's assertion that 0.5% is maybe 12,000 pounds, and really you're right, that's a relatively small amount, but I think going beyond the 20% that we agreed to in December would put all of the state's proposals in some danger of rejection from NOAA, and that would cause quite a bit of chaos. Matt Gates.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the presentation today. I'll offer just a slightly different perspective. Is for some of the smaller states, 12,000 pounds is a significant amount of fish, and so if we were looking at this earlier on in the process, where we could have that could have made the difference between for a state like Connecticut possibly going even smaller on minimum size or something. So, which is a very significant impact. So I think there is some significant impact to even small decimal point changes. Thanks.
Smack me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just quickly, work off what Matt just offered. I'll offer the perspective of the northern region. We had 4 states trying to come to consensus on, something to put forward, and we encountered the same thing where we were getting, variations that were slightly over the amount that we were trying to achieve, and it was just we held ourselves to kind of, sticking to the letter of the law there, and it was meaningful. It could have meant extra time in Massachusetts, or a smaller size in Connecticut, or more fish in the bag in Rhode Island, and we all kind of compromised. So I don't dispute anything anybody said about rounding, and these discussions are always kind of hilarious in hindsight, how nuanced we get with this stuff. But I don't disagree with the 12,000 pounds and whether that's biologically meaningful. It's really not the point for me. We in the northern region kind of went into the process with hard threshold and stuck to that. And so that's kind of the perspective that I'm approaching this.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any. Oh, Nicola Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to offer that I have a motion when you feel like the discussion has resolved.
Okay, noted. I do see a hand from Mike Luisi.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. I appreciate the comment that you made, and I wonder if NOAA is online, maybe to comment. Coming into this meeting, I was sitting here thinking about what we've got, the efforts that we've all made to do one of the hardest liberalizations I think that we've ever had to do, with black sea bass in recent years. And we all made a solid attempt to try to maintain the level of liberalization that we walked out of the meeting with in December, or I guess that was
when we decided on the 20%. And, New Jersey was the one state that didn't have a number to shoot for. They had and I don't even know if the range that was presented today was available to New Jersey while they were preparing this. That would be something that maybe Joe or Adam could help me understand. But if we were faced with this table and we were sitting at the table talking about how much we would liberalize, if we did it backwards, I would easily be convinced that we could have achieved a 21% liberalization, and then everybody's options would be okay. And I don't see there being a whole lot of risk in that. Now, my level of concern raised, John, when you mentioned that if we were to submit a series of regulatory actions by the states that exceeded that 20%, that we could all be in jeopardy based on what NOAA's decision would be, whether that is, I guess, conservationally equivalent. That concerns me. So, I don't know if there's any more information that we can get from the service on where they stand with this rounding. I was inclined to support the options as they were presented and not take any of them out today. And I'm getting the sense that that's the direction we're going. But it would be helpful to hear from the service if they're able to comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Savannah Lewis, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So just to comment on this briefly, this is largely a discussion for the board and for the states themselves, but overall, the way we look at it is that the motion in December was moved to adopt conservation equivalency with a 20% liberalization from status quo measures. The motion wasn't 21%, and nor was it really vague in terms of what the increase is. So our standard of review is what this board decides. So we will review what the commission will send us in a letter and the documentation that they provide to support that decision. That all states have achieved the requirement in the motion that was passed by both this body and the council. So that's kind of the insight I can provide, and I hope that that's helpful.
Thanks, Savannah. Okay, so we're about 30 minutes in. Mike Wayne, your hand's been up for a while. Is this a question regarding the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, we'll allow one question from the public on the presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. Mike Wayne with the American Sport Fishing Association. I'm wondering if staff has a slide that shows what the RHL is compared to what the expected harvest is under the RDM runs that occurred to create this table.
Hi, Mike. Yeah, so good question. I do not have any median harvest estimates in this presentation, mainly because we were calculating the percent liberalization a little differently from what we have in the past this year. We were calculating everything at so the RDM puts out 100 draws of information. And before that, we were taking the median of the estimated harvest from those 100 draws. We had some conversations with the RDM team, and the decision support tool was outputting information a certain way. So we this year are calculating everything at the draw level, not just the harvest, but also the percent liberalizations. And so for each individual draw, we are calculating the percent liberalization, comparing coast-wide harvest for status quo and the proposed regulations in that individual draw. And then we take the median of every single of a 100% liberalizations, we're taking the median of. So these coast-wide percent liberalizations are median numbers based on all of these different calculations. And so it's not really a one-to-one ratio between this and the harvest. There's a little bit of the disconnect there. But this, as we were told from the RDM team, was a more statistically accurate way of calculating the coastwide percent liberalization. So that is the way we move forward this year. So sorry, I do not have those numbers.
Thanks, Tracy. Are there any more questions for Tracy on her presentation? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Nicola, you mentioned you had a motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will get it up on the board and then hope to provide rationale if I get a second to it. So I would move to approve regional option configurations D, I, J, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, and T as identified in Table 5 of the staff memo.
I see a hand from Jason McNamee. Is that a second?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Nicola, please justify your motion.
All right,
And
thank
Nicola-
you. But yes.
Nicola, just so, since we can't circle on the fly, I think these are all the ones that fall less than, it's 20% or less, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay.
Anything that shows here as 20.0% or less are those corresponding letters. So I'm making this motion not because I think that there is a significant difference between 20.0 and 20.1%, or that there is a risk to the resource of overfishing from approving the full range of options, but because it is consistent with my understanding of what the assignment was given to the board, given to the regions in the board's prior motion. And it seemed to me that from the comment from Garfo that they had a similar understanding. You know, as Jason McNamee pointed out, the northern region worked really hard to get to an option that was 27% and no more. And that was difficult because we were dealing with, you know, some equity issues in the region and went through a pretty lengthy series of calls to get to that. And I'm sure that had we thought that 27.4% was allowed for our region, we would have submitted a different option. That would have had a couple more days here or there. And while those might sound like inconsequential differences, if you look at the range of options submitted by New Jersey, like the actual measures, what you see is that there are multiple versions of essentially the same option that only differ by a day. And so they're essentially asking for that leeway that the northern region said we didn't have, and that we had to stick specifically to 27%. So I believe that, you know, it's my perception that in removing some of these options, as this motion does, it still leaves New Jersey with, you know, the 3 or 4 basic options that it seems that they want to be able to take out to public comment and consider, you know, the options that look at 2 fish instead of 1 fish in that summer period, or an option that reopens the closures or gets to 10 fish for a longer time period in the spring. So I don't see that removing a couple of these options that are over that line that we drew is a significant hindrance to anyone here. Lastly, I don't see that the argument about the North Carolina South of Hatteras data, you know, being really relevant to this part of it, as those estimates were included in both the status quo runs and the alternative runs here. So I think it's a little bit of, you know, misleading to be talking about any type of 4% coastwide overestimation from those estimates being included. And I guess, you know, I said lastly, but while I have the microphone, I'd just like to acknowledge the cooperation and collaboration that the Northern Region states used when developing our option. And it makes a lot of significant progress towards better regional alignment. And so I just wanted to thank Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New York for the process that we undertook. So thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Jason, did you want to add anything?
Nicola hit every single point that I had on my notebook here, so I won't retread that ground. But maybe I actually appreciated her last comment there, and yeah, we had a really good process. You know, a lot of good iteration between the states, and you know, frank discussions, but collegial discussions. It was a good process. So my appreciation to the other northern region states as well. So thanks, Mr. Chair.
David, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to speak in opposition to this motion. I think approving all the options makes sense. We talked about the risk today, and that's most important. I think in, you know, given the size of the biomass of this fishery, I think there's some wiggle room. And this board, if I heard Noah correctly, can make its own decisions today. Our hands are not tied by what we did in December and what we did in the previous meeting. We can talk about this and make this decision to say that there's really a negligible difference between any of the options because of this decimal point component and the imprecision of all of this. We know that. We know it exists in all our fisheries. And so I think it's unfortunate that we'll have to spend time debating this over this back and forth, because if the northern states had been the region that received the uncertainty like New Jersey ended up with after our last meeting, I'd be sitting here using the same exact logic, asking, is it a risk? And if it's not a risk to the biomass biologically, let's just move on and accept the fact that things get lost in the margins, because guess what? Our margins are really, really wide here. So I think this is a key example of where the public really kind of just gets like, oh my gosh, this is exhausting. Because frankly, it's exhausting. I totally understand where everybody's coming from. And that's why if the shoe was on the other foot, and if the North didn't really know what they were trying to get and came back with something else, I would have given them wiggle room there too, because it's only fair. You know, the biomass can take it. And I think we need one less point of conflict across all of our lives. So frankly, I don't support this. I'm not prepared to make a motion, but I hope somebody does. I'd gladly second it.
All right, thank you, David. I'm going to go to Matt Gates next, and then Adam Nowalski.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think I'll speak in support of the motion. I understand the tough position we put New Jersey in by having them sort of get the scraps after the other states figured out what they needed. And then, so they didn't know exactly what they were shooting for. And I think it was appropriate for them to put forward a whole bunch of options that with small degrees of variation, because they don't really know how things are going to work out with the RDM and the percent that they get. But now that we know that some of those options are came out over 20%, I think it's appropriate to eliminate those options now, and still leave them with a bunch of options that they can go out to public with that have different management outcomes. So I think I'm going to end up supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Adam?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I am prepared to substitute, and I'll speak to it if I can get a second. I move to substitute to approve all regional options except A and G.
David Sikorsky, is that a second?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Adam, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think Mr. Sikorsky's comments about approving all of these, in particular in light of the North Carolina harvest, is a reasonable way forward. However, I'm going to choose a middle ground here, deferring to the technical committee's position on leaving the harvest in, and that the status quo was calculated with it in originally. So I can understand the case that we do have to draw a line somewhere. However, what I'm concerned with the original motion is that it basically sets a precedent that says we can't round decimal points that equate to a couple thousand pounds of fish, which I think is just ludicrous. The motion back in December did not say up to, it said a 20% liberalization. Staff clearly found that they could make the case for the rounding that's taken place here. I'm highly confident that if we went back in time and looked, we would find similar cases of rounding would be allowed. While I understand the original motions makers' comments and concerns about, well, if we're going to round, why couldn't we do 27.1, 2, or 3 in the northern region? And my response to that is, at the joint meeting last month, we explicitly set the northern region at up to 27%. That's what was included there at that time. I think that by going forward with this motion that I'm comfortable with, it still gives New Jersey flexibility to potentially implement options 2 and 5 if the southern region goes ahead and chooses 3. We would be in contact with the southern region to try to get a sense. Our state's Marine Fisheries Council will meet later this month. I'm confident that we can still go ahead and get our option in by April 1st. Our state would not choose option 2 or 5 until we knew whether or not it would conflict with the southern region. We certainly don't want to put this entire plan at risk. I think this is a reasonable way forward at this time, and I hope the board can support this motion. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam. David, would you like to add anything?
No, I think Adam's comments and my previous comments kind of speak for themselves, so thank you.
Is there any further discussion from the board on this motion? Nicola, I see your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to respond to one part of Mr. Nowalski's comments, and that the motion previously approved set the northern region at, no more than 27%. By the same logic, the southern region was explicitly given 16.5% in that motion. So if that is a compelling rationale for anyone, then we should also be only assigning we should be assigning 16.5 to the southern region and leaving whatever is left from that number. But I'll second the comment that it's strange how much harder it is to liberalize than to reduce. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicola. Joe?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I disagree with a lot of what Nicola said, but agree that we can't say exactly what that North Carolina harvest included means. But, originally the technical committee came to the board and said it's a buffer. Now they're saying it's more risk averse. So they obviously think that it would change these percentages if it was left out. So again, what we are arguing for in this motion isn't to move above the line that we all set. It is simply to say that we're not 100% sure where that line is, and we believe that this option still would, if the data was run correctly, get us there. Thanks.
Okay, any more discussion from the board? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so I'm wondering if there's anyone from the public who would like to speak on this motion before we call a vote. Stephen, I see your hand. Stephen Makalaba.
Stephen, you just need to hit that microphone button to unmute yourself. Should turn green. Stephen, it's still showing that you are muted on your end. And again, you should click on it. It should be red right now, and if you click on it, it should turn green. maybe John go to
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
other.
Stephen, we're gonna go to Mike Wayne, and we'll come back to you and give it another try. Mike Wayne, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Wayne with the American Sport Fishing Association. I just want to take a step back for a minute and remind the board that through the recreational reform initiative, specifically the harvest control rule, and then the rec measure setting process that implemented the percent change approach, the whole intent of that action was to try to acknowledge that there is significant imprecision in the catch data, and chasing decimal point levels of precision is a fool's errand. And yet here we are doing exactly the same thing and fighting over decimal places later in the process. It just seems very inconsistent with the entire intent of this action, which is the recreational catch data are not precise enough to drive these types of calculations. There is no statistical difference between any of those options. And I'm not sure why staff was unable to answer the question I asked previously, because I was simply asking, what is the target that this increase would equate to relative to the RHL? Is there a distance between that? Is there a buffer? I believe the answer to that question is yes, considering we were previously considering increases all the way up to 39%. And so the 20% is already a conservative target. And the level of precision that's being debated right now is eroding the credibility of this process. And I think it's silly that we continue to do this. And I would recommend that the board really sit down after this decision in this spec setting and think more specifically about that so we don't end up in this place again. Thank you.
All right, Stephen, we're gonna try you again. Try to unmute yourself, please. Okay, Stephen, apologies. Maybe we could work offline at some point in the future to figure that out for you. Okay, anything further from the board before we take a vote? Can I see hands if anyone needs to caucus? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so I'm assuming that no caucus is necessary. Tony, would you mind handling the vote?
Not at all. Do you just, well, all in favor, raise your hand. I'm just going to give it a second to let everyone's hands go up. I have Maryland, New Hampshire, and this is to the substitute motion. I didn't say that, I apologize. New York, New Jersey, Delaware. New Hampshire took their hand down. Renee, were you not in favor of the substitute?
Tony, we are in favor of the substitute.
Okay, just making sure. Okay, thank you. All right, I'm gonna put your hands down for you. Those that are against the substitute motion. I have Rhode Island, Virginia, Massachusetts, North Carolina, and Connecticut. I'm gonna put the hands down. Any null votes, NULL? Any abstentions? No fisheries. Tracy, am I right on the count is 5501?
That's what I got.
Mr. Chair, that would be a motion would not carry for lack of majority.
Thank you, Tony. So back to the original motion then. Any further discussion on this motion? Okay, not seeing any hands. I am gonna request a minute for caucus.
All right, got that.
Tony, is there a timer set you could show on the
I
presentation?
started one on my cell phone.
Okay, yeah, that works too.
I'll let you guys know when a minute is up, and if you need more time, that's fine.
Thank you, Tony.
Yep. It's been a minute. Let me know if you need another minute.
Okay, looking for any hands that feel they need additional time. Okay, not seeing any. So all who support the motion, please raise your hands.
I have Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Virginia, Massachusetts, North Carolina, New York, and Connecticut.
Okay, putting your hands down now. All opposed, please raise your hands.
I have Maryland, New Jersey, and Delaware.
Okay, hands down. No votes, NULL. Not seeing any, and abstentions.
No fisheries abstains. And John, I do have one question for Tracy and Nicola, and I apologize that I did not ask this beforehand. I meant to. I think option S shows at 20.0 in the table. So I think it should be included, but I might have misread it or saw my lines not lining up. Am I wrong?
I am double checking right now.
Okay.
I have it as 20.04.
Okay. Thank you. Then
Tracy, I don't know if you want to confirm that.
Yes, yeah. That sounds right.
okay. Thanks. Sorry about that.
Okay, so I believe the motion passed.
Yes, it did. I think I got 7-3 with one abstentions. Tony, is that what you?
I wasn't writing down I did not do the count, so sorry. Okay. I just read the names.
I got 7-3 with one abstention.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Okay, so motion passes, and I believe that concludes the business on this particular item. I'll just look to the board to see if anyone has any Anything final to say? Jay McNamee, I see your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to offer two things so that we don't lose track of them, and I think they're requests for a task to the technical committee. The first is, if folks remember back to I think it was at the joint meeting where we had a long tortured discussion on the uncertainty bounds and which size of uncertainty bounds we should be using. In the end, I think our motion sort of detached itself from that discussion, which was fine. But I think that is something that will come up again. And so it would be good to be out ahead of that. And so I'm hoping, at least starting with the technical committee, to kind of look into, you know, some way to optimize what the confidence limits should be. So that's one thing. And I think there's enough in that previous discussion to kind of provide a little more guidance than I just did now. And then the other thing, which is a task for the technical committee, is I had developed a little calculation to figure out and compare when your region is getting closer or further apart by way of the regulations across the different states. And I think it's fairly straightforward, but I'd love for the technical committee to take a look at that and vet it as a tool. It probably has some application beyond black sea bass, maybe not a ton of application, but I think it would be worthwhile for them to vet that. And the other aspect is there's a couple of you know, bells and whistles within it where you can upweight certain components and downweight them and things like that. That could use some additional vetting and guidance. So I'm hoping we could put those two things in front of the technical committee so that we're prepared with some information for the next go at this.
Thank you, Jay. Tracy and Chelsea, is that clear enough for the tasking for the TC for you to move forward on?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Matt Gates, I see your hand. Matt, I don't hear anything and your hand appears to be down.
Yeah, that's because I pressed the wrong button.
Okay. All right.
Sorry about that.
Great.
I just wanted to comment on the process we used this time. We used the RDM sort of in this regional context, and you know, I thought it was productive to work with the other states in generating options, but I feel like it sort of left out the public comment period portion of it, and that, you know, we could only really generate one option for the northern region, and you couldn't come up with state-specific options because each state's actions influenced, you know, the percent liberalization in the different states. So I think maybe if we just think about that when we do this process again in the future, of how we can get a little bit more public participation in the process. Thanks.
John, can I speak to that?
Of course, Tony.
Thanks. Matt, I mean, we can try to explore ways to do that. What we have been relying on is for the states to utilize your administrative processes to get as much public input as you can on possibilities. The timeline is so tight in between all of when we make these decisions. For us to hold public hearings or something like that is virtually impossible. And so I don't know what we can, you know, we are happy to try to explore options with you all. It's not that we are trying to exclude the public from these decisions. It's just that we have been relying on the state process in order to glean what your regional or state folks are looking for. I don't know what we don't have the information soon enough. Like Tracy was still working and running the numbers up until last week. And so it is very tight timelines for this process.
Yeah, I agree. The timelines are tight, even in the state processes. You know, it's tough. Just hopefully there's enough brain power in the group here to just come up with a little bit better system.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any other business to come before the board before we adjourn? All right, I'm not seeing anything. So I think we're done here today. I want to thank, of course, all the commission staff that worked to get this meeting together. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.